we stop to think about what might be the state of affairs in institutions of higher learning, and especially within the UC system, we probably would have assumed that by now we would have achieved racial, economic equality in all of our universities. That was almost 50 years ago. But at the same time, I probably would not have been able to imagine an event on this campus with this many people of color. And it is important to remind ourselves that the quest for education has always been at the heart of the struggle for Black freedom from the era of slavery to the present. Toni Morrison once said that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. The function of freedom is to free someone else. So in other words, we cannot be truly free unless we are involved in the ongoing struggle to expand freedom. And we're not just talking about members of our family, and there may be members of our families who may not be free in one way or another, or members of our community, but rather we need to think about members of our universe. Members of our universe with different racial ancestries, with different gender identifications, with different sexual orientations, with different nationalities, and maybe even members of the community of our universe who don't necessarily share our status as human beings. And so the arena of freedom is vast. The arena of the struggle for freedom is vast. But we also have to think about those who are perhaps most literally unfree. Those who are behind bars. Those against whom we often measure our own status of freedom. We know that we are free because we are not incarcerated. In the same sense that historically in this country, people could say that they were free by measuring themselves against the unfreedom of slavery. I know that I am not free because I am not a slave. I first became aware that we were facing a major problem with the structures and institutions of incarceration when I myself was in jail. That came shortly after the era that Ed was describing. And at that time, young people all over the country were involved in movements to free political prisoners, including members of the Black Panther Party, the Soledad Brothers, Lolita Lebron, Puerto Rican, and the Puerto Rican political prisoners. And many of us eventually became to recognize that it wasn't simply a question of political repression. And of course it was about political repression. But it was also about the institution of the prison itself. The racist and repressive history of punishment in this nation. And if I had enough time, I would explore that history and talk about its connections to slavery and the aftermath of slavery. But I will try to abbreviate what otherwise would be a long historical analysis by saying that that we continue to live with the ghost of slavery. And the ghost of slavery are most tangibly incorporated in the punishment system today, and particularly in what we call the prison industrial complex. At that time, we thought that there was a huge number of, an inordinate number of Black and Latino people behind bars. And maybe had we been in possession of the vocabulary at that time, we would have used Michelle Alexander's notion of mass incarceration. There were approximately 200,000 people behind bars at that time. Today there are over 2.5 million people in the country's jails and prisons and state prisons and military prisons and jails in Indian country and federal prisons, etc. And by the way, India is the second most populous country in the world, soon to outstrip China. And the number of people incarcerated in India is 200,000. So the U.S. is a prison nation. The U.S. has the largest number of people behind bars. And I mention these issues because as I have attempted to contribute to this historical quest for Black freedom, which we understand to be the core of Black history, I have devoted the overwhelming majority of my life to struggles having to do with the role of the prison system in this country. Mass incarceration, imprisonment fueled by racism. The prison population is disproportionately Black, disproportionately people of color. Native people are incarcerated at a higher rate per capita than any other group. And then, of course, I would have to say that mass incarceration has been produced by the workings of a global prison industrial complex linked to the rise of the rise of industrialized, globalized capital. And during that period, Ed, we were also trying to understand the connections between the struggles we were waging here in this place, in this community, and what was happening in other parts of the world. And this was in large part why we chose figures such as Patrice Lumumba and Emiliano Zapata, because we wanted to experience ourselves as citizens of the world. And I should say that should still be on our agenda, because with the assaults on the rights of immigrants and the wars that we can currently talk about, there's been an effort to create the impression that as people who live in the U.S., who are citizens with papers, in my opinion, citizenship does not primarily involve papers. As a matter of fact, undocumented immigrants who are more passionate citizens than anyone I have met who can claim to hold papers in this country. So we were thinking about the global context, the international context, and eventually came to recognize that there was a connection between the vast numbers of people behind bars and the interest of capital, the interest of profit. It is profitable to the purveyors of capital to be able to ignore human need for education, for housing, for health care, for recreation. And this is in large part why we have so many people in prison. It's not because so many people commit so many horrible acts of harm, although there are people who have committed horrendous acts of harm. I don't want to ignore that. But by and large, the motor that has fueled this soaring prison population is illiteracy, the lack of education, the lack of health care. As a matter of fact, if you want to know the names of the largest psychiatric institutions in the country, you would have to say Cook County Jail and Rikers Island in New York. Since the 1980s, since the Reagan-Bush years, the whole social service infrastructure, public hospitals, public education, housing has deteriorated under the pressure of producing corporate profit. What does not generate profit becomes irrelevant to the economy. Instead of responding to people's needs, incarcerate them and pretend the problem has evaporated. And make that process of incarceration profitable. And this is where we are today, not only in the U.S., but increasingly in other parts of the world as well, in Europe, in Australia, in Asia, and in Africa. As a matter of fact, the largest corporation in Africa, the corporation that actually has more employees than in Africa than any other is G4S, which is a security corporation. It runs jails and prisons all over the world. But let me get back to Black history. Because in celebrating Black history, we not only reflect on Black freedom, but rather on freedom for all beings who suffer from any of the wide-ranging forms of subjugation we have witnessed on this planet. And so our celebration of Black History Month it's a celebration that involves everyone. And it can focus on the meaning of the struggle, of the Black struggle for freedom, for other people of color, for people struggling for freedom within other regions of the world. You know, how remarkable that was. And the victory was a world historical victory. Many people repeated the fact that they could never have imagined a Black person in Washington. And now, everybody's used to having a Black man in the White House. And if I had time, I would talk a little bit more about the contradictions. But we always inhabit worlds of contradictions. We have to negotiate the fact that here we have this world historical achievement that led to the election of a Black man to the presidency. But then this Black man is at the helm of the capitalist, imperialist, belligerent United States of America. The country did not change just because he was elected.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, what I really appreciate about Obama was the fact that he invited us to participate in a process of bringing about change. But for the most part, we just went home. You know, we should have been doing what we do, organizing movements, putting pressure on him which she actually invited. But no, I think we decided, now he has the ball, he can run with it by himself. Racism, it seems to me, in the 21st century is even more entrenched than it was in the 20th century. It is more entrenched in this economic and social and political and educational and correctional structures of this country than ever before. And we have lost the ability to actually engage in insightful conversations about the persistence of racism. Because our vocabulary has not evolved as the structural racism in this country has evolved. The most important meeting comprises a mandate to continue the struggle for freedom. And I cannot guarantee that we will fully achieve the social justice goals for which we are now passionate advocates. So, I look at Marshall College, and I'm very, very happy that such an institution exists. And at the same time, I have to acknowledge that it's not quite as revolutionary as we wanted it to be. I've said on a number of occasions, okay, I love Thurgood Marshall. I really respect the role that he has played. And if I had time, I could give you some amazing examples. But I wish, when the decision was made to finally name Third College, and I think it's the longest college that didn't have a name.
Yes.
That it could have been something like Chavez Marshall College, you know? Something to indicate those solidarities that we were trying to create and promote. But we have what we have, and it's certainly so much better than what we had before. And I recognize, as I've grown older, that the revolution that one thinks one is fighting for is not always the revolution that one wins. But if one did not attempt to make those radical changes, then nothing would happen. And so we have to acknowledge the revolution that we did win. And I can't guarantee you that we will fully achieve the social justice goals for which we advocate. But I can guarantee you that if we commit ourselves to a struggle for a better, more ethical, more egalitarian world, the planet will definitely become a more hospitable place for humans and for all of the species with which we share the earth. And finally, let me end with my favorite quotation from Nelson Mandela. And it comes from The Long Walk to Freedom. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can only rest for a moment. For with freedom come responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not ended. Thank you.